What's up guys, Andre here, and today I'd like to take a look at how we can use the Tiptap editor with Vue, Tailwind, and Laravel. I'm currently working on a web app using Inertia, and I was tasked with having users being able to format some text on their own. So this requires some sort of WYSIWYG editor. I've used popular ones like Quill and Trix before, which are both very good and still viable options. However, I've been wanting to try Tiptap for a while now as it has some features that make it stand out. One is that there is official support for JavaScript frameworks like Vue and React, and also because it's a headless package allowing you to have complete control over the styles of the editor. So here's the demo project we'll be working towards. Typical editor here where you can format the text. So in this demo I have bold, italic, underline, H1, H2, unordered list, and so on. And again, this is a headless package, so you have complete control over how everything looks. We'll also take a look at making sure that this formatting gets persisted to the backend using Laravel. So how about we add another post here. Let's submit the form. Okay, there it is. And we want to make sure that this formatting is still used in here. And it is. There's the bold, italic, and underline. We'll also touch on security concerns and preventing cross-site scripting attacks. So yeah, a lot to cover here. It's probably going to be a long video, so let's go ahead and get started. So I have a blank Inertia Vue 3 app already set up here. Let's go ahead and make sure this is running correctly in the browser. Okay, let me just zoom out once here. And let's go ahead and start with the installation. So back to the docs here. Let's go to the installation for Vue 3. Okay, let's go ahead and install the dependencies. We already have an Inertia project, so we don't have to do this step. So we have Tiptap Vue 3. We have PM, which is Prose Mirror, which is another package Tiptap is built on top of. And we have Starter Kit for a bunch of prepackaged plugins. So in Tiptap, for every feature you want to use, you have to install a plugin. But the Starter Kit comes with common ones like bold and italic. So let's go ahead and do this. Let me stop this. Let's npm install everything. Okay, that's done. Let's run our server again. Okay, what's next? So it's saying to create a new component here, and we'll do that eventually. But for now, I just want to get it working within the default component. So that should be the welcome view within our project here. So let's get rid of all of this. We don't need props for now. And let's get rid of everything here. We don't need styles. We're mostly going to use Tailwind here. And let's just see if this is correct. Okay. So now we have to import the components from Tiptap. So we have to import editor and editor content from Tiptap Vue 3. And we also need to import the starter kit. So let's start with that. Let's paste that up here in our script setup. Okay. This is using the Vue 2 syntax, but there is one for Vue 3 with the composition API. Okay. Same thing here for the imports. And I believe there's one for script setup, which is what we're using. So we have to make use of this use editor composable, which will give us an instance of the editor, which is what we need. And then we can use it in our template like this. So we'll put that right here. I'm going to put this within a container, MX auto, so it's in the middle. And let's give it a max width of 4XL and give it some margin on the top and bottom. And we'll paste in the editor content here. I like using the title case editor content like this, but either way works fine. Then we have to use that composable. So we'll grab this. We'll put this right here. Doesn't seem to like this character here, so let me just replace that. And now we have multiple of the same quotes, so I'll change this to double quotes. Okay, so we're just instantiating the editor, and this should render in the browser, hopefully. So let me save this. Let's go back to our browser. And you can't see it, but it should be here. Maybe not. I forgot to import use editor. So that should be, we can close this within Tiptap. Did I import these? Thought I did. Oh, it should be use editor instead. Okay. Save that. Refresh. And you can see we have the default text in here. So let me just hide DevTools here. So again, being a headless package, there are no styles by default, and we are responsible for all of that. But this is an editor, should work. If I type text in here, it will show. And you can see as we add new lines, the editor grows, which I don't like that behavior by default, but we can change that with some CSS. And some keyboard shortcuts already work in here. So for example, if I highlight this text here and hit Command B, that does bold it. And I believe Command I is italic, and it does italicize it. So we do have a basic editor working already. Let's take a look at DevTools here actually. Let me just see what the default editor is. And you can see it adds this div with content editable true and a class of Tiptap and prose mirror, which is the library that Tiptap uses to build upon. So we do want to add some styles to this. For example, say border 1 pixel solid gray. So how can we do that using Tailwind classes? So when we create our editor instance using use editor here, we can pass in an option named editor props. So let me just search for that. Editor props. Go to that. So just like this, you can see we have editor props, and then we can pass it some classes here. So let's go ahead and grab this and put it within our config here. So let's paste that in. I don't believe I have prettier set up, so let me do that real quick. For my config, I need a prettier RC file, .prettier RC for prettier to work. I have a snippet here for prettier, these options, and now prettier should work. So now if I save this, it should format, and it does. Cool. We don't need this. And let's add our own classes here. Say border gray 400, and let's give it a padding as well. Okay, save that. Back here, hide DevTools, and we do get our border. Okay, now let's fix the height. I want it to be a fixed height, and if it goes above that, I want it to have an overflow scroll or auto. So again, we just have to add some Tailwind classes here. Let's start with min height, and I'm going to use arbitrary values here. So square bracket, let's say 12 rems. So that should give it a minimum height, and it does. Cool. But we still have the same behavior when we keep adding lines here. So let me just add some lines here. You can see it still grows as we hit enter when we're at the bottom, which I don't like personally. So we can also add a max height. So basically the same thing as this, but a max height. And also an overflow Y auto, and that should scroll it. And now hopefully this should look good. So let's try again. Let's hit enter here, and you can see we have a scroll bar. Awesome. Okay, now let's add some buttons here. So buttons for things like bold, italicize, and underline, or whatever features you want. So we'll add a new section above the editor for our buttons. So right here, let's make it a section. Let's give it a name of buttons. Also give it some classes here. Flex, items, center. Let's also flex wrap it. Let's give it a gap. And let's give it the same border. So border gray 400 and padding 4 as well. And let's say buttons go here. Okay, save that. And let's see how that looks. Okay. And this outline doesn't look very good, so I'm going to remove that as well. So this blue outline on the main editor. So we can say outline none, I believe. Okay. And we sort of have a double border going on right here. So for this, we can say border, or instead of border, border top, border left, and border right. Okay. Now, if you go back to the docs, there should be examples of buttons here. And you can see some default buttons within the editor here. So these should work. For example, if I bold this, it does work. So if you take a look at the code, you can see how that is done. we have this click handler, and we just call a method called toggle bold. And it takes care of both cases when it's toggled or when it's not toggled. And we should be able to style that accordingly as well. So let me grab this. We also need this VIF, so we'll add that as well. So we'll add the VIF here. Then we'll add the button, or the first button at least, right here. Save that. And you can see the conditional class for when it's active or not. So we don't have this isActive class. We'll add our Tailwind classes. So how about bggray 200? And how about we also add a class for some padding? Okay. So hopefully that button should show and it should render. Save that. Back here, there's the bold. Let's see if it works. Let's highlight this text. Let's click this button. And it does work. And you can see we have that border, and we can untoggle it as well. Awesome. How about we add rounded as well? Cool. So it's basically the same thing for italic. So let's do that quickly. Let me just duplicate this and change it to italic. We'll add the icons in a second. Remember, this is a headless package, so we are responsible for everything here, except the functionality which Tiptap is providing for us. So this should be toggle italic. Toggle italic. And this should be italic. And that should work. Save that. There's italic. Let's italicize this. And it does work. And what's happening here is Tiptap, or Prose Mirror, whichever library is doing the work, is adding strong tags or I tags around the text here. And Tailwind does have default styles for that. So you can see if I unbold this, the strong should go away. And it does. And if I click it again, you can see it's added here. And for italicize, it should be I, or actually EM tag for italicize. Okay. Now for the next button, which is going to be underline, it doesn't actually come with the starter kit. So most of these, including bold and italic, come with the starter kit. Remember, everything is a plugin in Tiptap, but for some reason, underline is not included. So if we try underline here, toggle underline, should be underline, and same with this, you'll see it does not work. Or there should be errors because those methods don't exist. So let me show you how you can make use of plugins here. If it's not within the starter kit, let's look for underline here. Okay. So let's go ahead and install it using npm. Stop this, run our dev server again. And let's see how we can use this. So we'll be using toggle underline like we did on bold and italic. Let's just look at the example here. So toggle underline we'll use, and then we just need to import it like this up here, and we need to use it within our extension. So right here, we can add it here. Okay. And hopefully that should work now. So if we go back to our code, let's refresh. Let's try underlining Tiptap. And it does work. And I'm not sure what tag it's using for underline. Let's see. It's using the U tag. And again, Tailwind does have default styles for this. Okay, so I'll just paste in the rest of the buttons here, which is pretty much doing the same thing. And the rest of them should be within the starter kit. So I'll be back when that's done. Okay, so I added the rest of the buttons here. One thing to note is for undo and redo, these should have disabled styles because sometimes they are disabled. So if I add some text here, you'll see that undo becomes available, but redo is not available until we undo at least once. And it does work. So pretty straightforward for undo and redo. We just have to make sure we add the disabled style. And you can see the disabled functionality right here. Okay, so let's make sure everything works. Let me close this. So bold, italic, and underline should still work. But how about we try H1? So nothing seems to happen here, but it looks like it does toggle. So you can see the gray background here. And if I untoggle it, it does untoggle. So let's put it back on. Let's look at DevTools. And let's see if the H1 is actually there. So if I go here, you can see there is an H1 here, but there is no default style within Tailwind for H1s. And also for the rest of the buttons here. So H2, list, ordered list, block quote, code, and HR is just a horizontal rule. So if you want, you can just add some CSS for the H1. So for example, you can go down here, add a style. You can scope it to the Tiptap editor if you like. So the class is Tiptap. H1, say font size, I don't know, 32 pixels. Font weight, bold. Hopefully that does it for H1. And it does. And that will work. And you can do that for the rest of the tags as well. Or the better way would be to make use of the Tailwind typography plugin. So let me just open that. Typography plugin. And I didn't want the GitHub page, I wanted the docs. So right here. Tailwind will add default styles for most of these tags. You just have to add the pros class. So let's go ahead and make use of this. Let's npm install it. Then we have to add it to our Tailwind config. So let me just get rid of this style here for H1. Let's go ahead and npm install this. Let's rerun our server. Let's open up our Tailwind config. Let's add typography in here. The docs are using common.js. You can see the required syntax here, but I want to make it consistent with this and use ESM here. So we can just import typography from Tailwind typography. Typography from Tailwind CSS typography. And that should work. Save that. Okay. Now we just have to add the pros class on a parent element. And hopefully that should work. Let me just refresh this. Back to our welcome view. And we'll add the pros class on our attributes here. So we'll add it right here. And let's see if this works. So I believe pros has a max width on it as well. So that's why it's a shorter length here. So we can get rid of that. Say max width none. Because we already have a max width right here. Okay, save that. Okay. And now hopefully the rest of these buttons should work. And it does. So there's H1. Let's try a heading 2. Cool. Let's try a list. 1, 2, 3. The spacing is a bit much here, but I'll show you how you can customize that. I think that's because it's adding p tags within the list item, and the p tags have margin on the top and the bottom as well, which we don't want. But let's try our ordered list for now. 1, 2, 3 as well. Let's try our block quote. Hello there. Okay. Let's try our code. Say console.log hi. Make that into code. Okay. You can see by default it has these backticks. But you can also add a syntax highlighter if you want as well. And HR is just a horizontal rule. Okay. So first thing I want to do is make these dots a bit darker. It's too light for my taste. Just so I can show you how to customize this. So if you take a look at the docs, there should be a section here. So in this section, you can see it says customizing the CSS, and this will do it globally. You can also do it per instance, but in this case, I do want to do it globally. So again, we have to go into our Tailwind config, extend the typography plugin, and then override any styles we want in here. And I believe there is a section here for the bullets right here. So yeah, we can override these like this. Let's just go back to that and grab the typography object here. So I believe it goes up to here, hopefully. Or it might be one more. Go to our Tailwind config. Let's extend our typography scale or the typography plugin, space that in, and we'll get rid of these. Okay. Now let's look for the bullets. Yeah, so this is what we want to override. It's just a CSS variable. Let's paste that in. And this should be fine. You can use this syntax or you can use the dot syntax as well. So let's see if the bullets are now pink. Back here, back to our app. Theme is not defined. I think we have to accept the theme as a callback or as a parameter to the callback. So let's see if we can grab it from here. Yeah, it should be like this. Okay. And we need to close it right here. Sorry, it should be curly and then this. Save that. Okay. So that should work, hopefully. Back here. Let's try our ordered list. Or sorry, it should be unordered list. And it is pink. Cool. And let's fix the spacing. Like I said, it's too much for me. So if you look at DevTools, you'll see that each one of these list items is within a p tag, which is causing more margin on the top and the bottom, which I don't want. So again, we can customize that within here. We can say for list items, and for within list items, a p tag, let's say margin 0. And hopefully that should fix it. Save this. Okay. Again, let's try the unordered list. Hi there, and you can see it is less margin. Cool. Okay, now let's work on adding icons. So I went with the material design icons, which you can find here. And I'm also using a Vue package that encapsulates them into components, which is nice. So this package here, Vue material design icons, allows you to just import it from a Vue component, which is nice. So let's go ahead and copy this. Let's stop this. Let's install this. Let's npm run dev again. And we can import our icons just like this. And the link to this site should be within this page. Right here, Material Design Icons website, which is this. So for example, bold. We can use this icon, but it's already within the Vue 3 library as a Vue component. If you just want to do it manually, you can just click on the icon and hit copy SVG, which will work fine as well. Okay. So we also have options for size, which is nice. And also the fill color. But by default, it should use the default text color, which I'm okay with. So let's take a look at this here. Let's grab this. So this name here corresponds to the name of the icon. So in this case, it's format bold as title case. So without the dash, and with F uppercase and with B uppercase. So let's go ahead and import bold and try it out. So back to our welcome view. Import. We can name it whatever we like. Bold icon. And then it's from format bold. Because that's what it's called here. Okay. And then to use it, let's get rid of this. Let's say bold icon. And there's already a default size. But if we wanted to change that, we can say size equals. Let's make it big to see it working. There's also a title prop you can pass in, which will show the title on hover. So bold is good. Let's close that out. And hopefully that should render the icon. And it does. And we should still have our background. And we do. Awesome. I think the default size is a good size. Not sure what it is. I think it's 24. And that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to replace all of these with the icons found in this icon pack. Okay, so I added the icons here. It looks like it's defaulting to black, like pure black here. If If I take a look at my color picker, it is, which we don't want. I believe if we just add a class here, it should inherit the color. So text gray, I don't know, 700 should be fine. Let's make it pink so we can see it's working. And it does work. Okay, so gray is fine. 700. Okay, cool. So now it shouldn't be pure black. It should be gray 700. And it is. Cool. And you can also see our title here as we hover over the icons. Let's just double check everything still works. Bold, underline, H1, and it looks like it is. Okay, now let's work on getting vModel to work with our editor here. And there is a section in the docs for this. So if we go back to the installation for Vue 3, you can see the section here for use vModel, but it is still using the Vue 2 syntax. So we'll just kind of do it ourselves here. It's not too difficult. So let's set everything up first. Let's add another field here, just like it was a typical form, and also a submit button. So let's go into our welcome view. Let's make this a form. So we'll say form. And this should be closed out somewhere down here. Okay, save that. Let's give it a submit handler. So let's say at submit.prevent, typical Vue inertia stuff here. Say submit form. Let's also give it a class space y of 8. And let's give it another input field here. And we'll build out a blog eventually, so we can make use of our Tiptap editor for the content of the blog. So we'll say input type equals text. Let's give it a class as well with full and whatever border I gave it. Border gray 400 and P2. Doesn't matter. What's important is the vModel here. So again, basic Vue stuff here. As we make changes to this input, we want a piece of state to update. And eventually that will get submitted through when we send it to our backend. So we'll make a field here called content. And we'll make use of useForm, which is the form helper in Inertia. So say const form equals useForm. We have to make sure to import useForm from Inertia. UseForm, okay. And title is going to be null by default. And this is our content. So we'll use this for the editor, and we'll leave it as null for now. And we also have to add this use form, or sorry, this submit form function here. And we'll leave that blank for now as well. So right here, function submit form. We'll just leave it blank. Okay. So let's see if I did that right. There's our input text. We have some rendering issues here because I use space Y4, which is fine because I'm going to move this to its own component. But again, typical vModel stuff. As I update this, we want that piece of state to update. And it does update for the title. So let's look for that right here. Let's look for our title here. Did I name it title in the vModel? Sorry, there should be title. And the content will be our Tiptap editor. So save that. Let's refresh this. Back here. Let's look for our form object. It's right here. Let's look for our title. Right here, it's null by default, but as I type in here, you'll see it updates. And sometimes you have to refresh it, but right now it is updating. And we want the same treatment for our editor here. And this will make it easier if you're reusing this component elsewhere in your application. And it's also nice to have it in its own component. So let's go ahead and do that first. Let's move all of this into its own component. So everything we did with Tiptap, we want that in its own component. So I am just going to duplicate what we have in here since it's already in here. Let's call it my editor. And that should be within the components folder. So I'm going to move that into components. Okay. And we don't need any of this stuff. We do need use editor here. We don't need this. Don't need this. Don't need this. We don't need the form. Make sure to delete that down here as well. So we only need the section for our buttons and the actual editor content. So do we need this div? Don't need this. So yeah, we can get rid of that div as well. Save that. Okay, so everything we did in Tiptap is now within this component. And I want this to have a root div as well. You don't have to, but I'm kind of used to that. So let's just grab all of this, put it within a root div. And now within our parent component, we want to make use of that instead. So we no longer need all of this because it's in our component. We don't need this. It's just going to be my editor. So my editor. Okay, my VS Code doesn't want to find it, so we have to do it manually. So we have to import it from components. We don't need any of this anymore. Don't need this as well. Don't need these two. Don't need this because it's within our component. Okay. So let's import my editor from /components/my editor. Okay. Save that. Hopefully that still renders. My editor, does that work? Refresh. Okay, and it does. So this still works. Everything is within its component now, or its own component. Okay, still works. But now what we want to do is use vModel on this, just like we have vModel on our standard input. And we want it to update as anything is changed within here. So let's do that. So this should be form.content. Okay, so within my editor, we want to accept that prop. So we'll put that right here after the import. Const props equals define props. And I do have a video on using vModel on child components. So I'll make sure to link that in the cards in the top right. And this is similar. So model value is the name of the prop if you're passing in a vModel. We're accepting a string. We also need to emit changes back to the parent. So say const emit equals define emits. And the name of the event is going to be update : model value. Okay. So now instead of hard coding this, let's grab this, and it should be the content coming in. So it should be props.model value. Okay. So let's save that and let's put that within our parent component, or the default text within our parent component. So right here, instead of null, let's pass that in. Let me use double quotes here. And let me just add some exclamation marks. So it's a bit different from before. Okay. Actually, let me add an H1 at the beginning. H1, heading here, close the H1, and then we have our p tag. Okay, save that. And hopefully that gets rendered. And it does, cool. But now, as we make changes here, we want to update the parent. So how do we do that? So back to our child component. I'm actually going to move this to the bottom. So content is first. And after content, we can make use of onUpdate. So this callback will run anytime any change is made on the Tiptap editor. So let me just show you that that is the case. So it's a callback. And we can also destructure the actual editor instance here, which we need to grab the HTML. So let me show you what I mean. So how about we just console log editor.get HTML. So anytime any change is made, just output the HTML. So let's save that back here to refresh just in case. Dev tools. And let's make a change here. So I'm going to update this. It should show the HTML. And it does. Cool. You can see the change right here. So this happens on any update, even if I press any of the buttons. So if I change this to an H2, you can see the corresponding HTML. If I add another paragraph tag, not sure what this error is, might be one of my plugins, but if I type in here, it does update. Cool. So now we just have to emit these changes back up to the parent. And we already have that emit function, so we can just use that. So we can say emit, the name of the event is update model value, and we want to pass through editor.getHTML. Okay, so save that, and let's make sure that works within the parent. So again, let me refresh here. Let me just close and open DevTools to make sure Vue DevTools is refreshed. Let's open that up. Let's go to that component. Let's look for our form right here. Let's look for content is the name right here. And let's see if this updates. So I'm going to change this. And it didn't update here, but if I hit refresh, it should update, hopefully. And it does. So I think you have to add a watch or two for this to update. I think it's okay because by the time we submit this to the backend, these changes are synchronized correctly with the form object. Okay, so that's our V model working. Let's set up our backend endpoint to make sure we are getting the correct changes. So remember, from within welcome view, we have this submit form. And we can hit any endpoint here, which we will define in our Laravel routes file. So how about we post to just slash, and let's add some options here. Doesn't really matter here. Preserve scroll true, and on success. It's a callback. Let's just alert form submission success. Okay. Save that. Let's go into our routes file. Finally, we're hitting the backend now. I believe I removed all of these props, so we can get rid of this. I'm actually going to pass in data later, so I'll leave the array. Let's define that route for our post endpoint. Slash. Let's accept the request here. Let's make sure to import request. And for now, let's just die dump request all, just to see that the correct data is being passed through the backend. So we should have title, should be whatever we type in, and this should be whatever we update it to. Save that. What is this error? POS should be post. Okay, save that. Refresh just in case. Title here should be the title. Let's say heading here. How about we add an ordered list or unordered list? Post method is not supported. So I hit that button and it's submitting the form, which leads me to believe that we have to add type equals button to all of our buttons within here. So within our button here, or within each button. So let me just do this. Let me just select all of these, and then we'll add type equals button. Type equals button. Okay, save that. Refresh, and I just realized I don't have a submit button. So let's add that as well. So back to our parent. Before the end of the form, let's add our submit button. So button type equals submit. You don't have to add that, but I'll do it anyways. Let's say add post or create post. We also have to add some classes. Say BG blue 600, PX2 or P2 is fine, rounded. Hopefully that looks decent. Should be P-2, and it should be text white. Okay, let's try one more time. Title here. Let's add an H2 here. Heading 2, modify this. Let's add an unordered list. 1, 2, 3. And let's submit that. And hopefully we get the correct data on our backend. And of course we don't. And of course I added this by accident. One more time. Okay, let's hit create post. And it looks like we do get the correct data being passed through to our backend. So we have our title, and we have our Tiptap editor with all of the corresponding HTML. Okay, so now we have to work on the backend, and we'll also quickly take a look at security to make sure we account for cross-site scripting. Okay, let's see how quickly we can make a blog within Laravel. Let's say PHP artisan make model. It's going to be a post. We want a factory. We want a migration, and we want a resource controller. Okay, let's run our server again. Go to post. Make sure guarded is an empty array. Let's go to our migration, create posts table. Okay, so we want table string for our title, should be fine. And how about text for our content? Okay. Next, let's add some dummy data. So post factory, let's just say for our title, let's just give it fake words, 3 words, and make sure it's a string. And for our content, same thing, but sentences. Okay, let's go to our Cedar database, Cedar, and we will uncomment this, but it's 4 posts. Okay, let's just make it 5. Okay, I should have my database set up already. Hopefully I did this correctly. Again, I have to stop this, migrate fresh seed, and I guess I don't have my database set up correctly. So I think I just have to change this. So let's update this. Should be dashes. Try that again, migrate fresh seed, and it does work. Let's run our server again. And let's pass in our posts to this main page here and just list them out here. And this will be our create form. So I should create a new post when we submit this form. Okay. So back to our routes web, back to our main route. Let's pass in posts, and we'll just say post all. Okay. Make sure to import post. Forgot a colon here. And within our welcome view, we should accept the posts as a prop. So const props equals define props. And we have our posts here. So post should be an array. Okay. And we can just render that somewhere down here after our form. How about we add another section here, give it some margin. Let's add an unordered list. Let's say list inside, I believe. And list disk. Okay. And let's say list item. It should be a link, but let's just make sure it renders correctly. And this should be a v4. Post in posts. Key should be post ID. And there should be post title. Okay. Hopefully I did everything correctly. Save that. Does it render? It does. Cool. So now we need to link to the single post page. So this needs to be a link. So let's wrap this in a link. Let's also give it a class. Text blue 600, hover underline, and it should go to the single post page. So href equals, we'll use the route helpers since WYSIWYG is installed by default on Inertia apps. So route, we'll name it post.show, and we'll pass through the post. Okay, save that. We have to define that route. So we'll put it right here. So get request to /posts/post like this. This takes in the post. We'll use route model binding. And how about we just die and dump to make sure everything's working? Okay. And then eventually we'll render an inertia view. So I'll grab that while we're here, and we'll put it there for now. It's not going to get there because we are dying and dumping right here. Okay, we have to give it a name too. Name is post.show. Okay. Hopefully I did that correctly. Let's hit this, and it is working. Okay. So we need to define that show view. Should be pretty straightforward. Let's just grab what we have in welcome. All of this. Actually, we can just duplicate this. Show.view. This should take in a single post. Should be an object. Don't have this as well. There should be the post title. Doesn't really matter. But we'll do it anyways. Post.title. And we can keep this container. Don't need this form. Don't need this. How about we make it an h2.font or what? Text 2XL. Font semi-bold. Should be fine. This should be post.title. And then within here is where our content goes. So I'll just put it within a div. Again, I'll give it some margin. And for now, we'll use the curly brace syntax, but this will not render the HTML tags. But let's just see if it works. Our seeder is not using HTML tags, but we'll change it after. Post.content. Okay. Does that work? Oh, we have to change our route here. So it should be show. You're passing in a single post, and that should be post. Okay, save that. Hopefully our view renders with this information, and it does. Not sure why this is not rendering 2XL. This happened to me in my demo project. What I did was remove this for a second, the forms plugin, save that, and now it's 2XL, and then I put it back. Not sure why that happens. Or maybe you can just restart the server. Okay, now it's 2XL. And now we can make use of this form to create a new post. So we have to add that endpoint as well. So back to our routes web. Right here, we already have the endpoint defined. So you do some validation here. I'm not going to worry about that in this video. We have to create the post. Post create. We have our title, which will come from request title, and content will be request content. And again, make sure you have validation in place. And we don't need this, but I'll add it anyways. Return back with message. So you would use this message to display some sort of toast notification, but we're not going to do that. Post was created. That's fine. Okay. So hopefully this should create a post if I did everything correctly. Say new post. This content should be fine. Create post. There's our alert. And there it is. Cool. But if I go to this, you'll see that the HTML is not being rendered correctly because we're using the double curly brace, which escapes any HTML tags. So within here, you'll see right here, if we use the double curly brace, it will not render any HTML, which is there for security reasons. So again, this is actually in our database, and we actually do want to render this information here, or this data with these tags. So instead of using the double curlies, we can make use of the v-HTML directive instead. Sorry, v-HTML, and that should be post content. And always be careful when you use this directive because it does render HTML and could lead to some sort of cross-site scripting, which we will take a look at as well. So we don't need this anymore. I actually like the name in React. It's called dangerously set HTML, which informs you that this can lead to potential security issues. But for now, this should be fine. Let's see if it renders. And it does, but again, we have to wrap this in the pros class for Tailwind. So we can add that right here, pros, max width, none, and hopefully that should render. And it does. Cool. Let's try one more here. We'll add more formatting within Tiptap. Another one. Heading here. Let's add an H2. H2 goes here. Paragraph tag. How about this UL? 1, 2, 3. How about this order list? 1, 2, 3. How about a block quote? Block quote goes here. Let's add some code as well. Console.log hi. Oops. And let's add this horizontal rule. Okay. Let's create that post. There's the alert. There it is. And you can see it does get rendered here. Awesome. Now let's add some security and make sure we're not vulnerable to cross-site scripting attacks. So to show you that we are vulnerable, let's go back to our welcome view. And I'm not going to use the Tiptap editor for now. I'll just use a plain text area. Remember, the front end can be tampered with and any data can be passed in through the backend. So we'll just use a text area here to show you the cross-site scripting. So text area. And it will be for this content as well. This doesn't really matter. Let's just give it with full, or sorry, class equals with full. That should be fine. And the V model will be form.content, at least for now. We'll put it back to Tiptap after. Form.content. Okay. Save that. See what we get back here. Let's refresh. Okay. So we do get this text area with just our HTML being rendered here. So let's do the classic cross-site scripting example. Let's give it a title here, Hackermans. And let's get rid of this. Let's say image source equals. Let's give it a source that does not exist. Let's just say backslash. And then on error as an attribute. Let's put some JavaScript in here. Say alert hacked. Okay, close that. Close out the image tag. Let's create this post. Okay, there it is. And now when I click on this, since we have no protection against cross-site scripting, this alert should show up. And it does. So again, obviously this is bad, and we always want to make sure we protect against this. So Tiptap does have a PHP package which does some purification and sanitization, but I went with a different package called Laravel Purify, which is very simple to use. Laravel Purify. Here it is. So if you take a look at the docs here, and if you take a look at this paragraph here, for this scenario, which is our current scenario, it says it's likely best practice to sanitize on the way out instead of on the way in. So instead of sanitizing what we entered, so our image with the on error attribute, we can sanitize on the way out instead. And that's because the database doesn't care what text it contains, which makes sense because the database won't run your JavaScript. So let's take this approach. So let's go ahead and install this package first. Pretty straightforward. Let's go back here. Composer required as always. Let's publish the config, which does have some options for specifying which tags you want to keep or not keep, depending on your app. Okay, let's run our app again. And now what do we have to do? Let's go back there. So for our model, we want to add this casts array and then purify that. So in this case, our model is post, our field is content. So we can just grab this and put it on our post model. So let's do that. Let's go to post. Let's add that right here. Let's make sure to import purify HTML on get. Let's save that. Actually, let me comment this out first. Let's save this. Let's go back to our web. And let me just tie in dump post content right here as we're getting it. Tie in dump post content. Okay. So again, we commented that out. So this should have our on error equals alert. Again, that's stored in our database, which is fine. We just want to make sure this is not executed as JavaScript on the front end. So let's go back to our app. Here, you'll see that we do get the on error. But now if we put that back, so we'll leave the dyn dump. Let's put this back. You'll see that the on error is stripped out, which is what we want. Let's refresh. You can see the on error is not there anymore. And if we remove the dyn dump, the JavaScript should not be executed because it's not there anymore. Save that. And our JavaScript is not executed. Again, one more time. Let's remove this. Our JavaScript is going to execute, which is bad. Okay. But if we put this back, it's not executed and we are protected against cross-site scripting attacks. Cool. Now again, you want to make sure that it is letting in all the tags you want it to let in, and that is specified within the config. Actually, I think it's not letting in one tag here. Let's take a look at this one here. Everything looks okay except the console log. Remember there was backticks around this? Let me just actually show you within Tiptap. Oh, I don't have it here anymore. We can put that back actually. Welcome Vue. Let's put Tiptap back. Comment this out. Put this back. And let me just show you the code tags should have a code HTML tag around it. So code here. And there's the backticks. Let me just show you the HTML. Select the code. You can see right here the code tags. But if you take a look at the actual rendered one, so this one, you'll see that there are no code tags because they've been stripped out from this package. You'll see it's just p tags. And that's because within the config, which has some sensible defaults, so Purify, PHP, down here you'll see it only allows these tags here. So you have to make sure this corresponds with everything you allow within Tiptap. And you can see there is no code tag here, so it strips it out. You can see there's other options here for properties as well. So if we add code here, save this, the code tag should be allowed. And the backticks should render here now. Save, refresh, and there it is. Cool. So there you have it, guys. We took a look at using the Tiptap editor within Vue 3, Tailwind, and Laravel. We also took a look at some security concerns and cross-site scripting. I think Tiptap is great, and although there's a bit of setup to get up and running because it's a headless package, being able to customize it however you like based on your app's needs feels really good. For example, you can use any icon set you want for the buttons here. If you wanted to put some of these within, say, a dropdown, you can do that as well, and so on and so forth. So if your application needs some sort of WYSIWYG editor, I highly recommend you check out Tiptap.